I want to begin today with a question. What if the most important thing said in a television program is the thing nobody says at all? Because I watched the latest edition of ITV News Talking Royals summer series featuring journalist and author Catherine Mayers, and I came away profoundly frustrated. Not because everybody on that panel was hostile to Meghan, they weren't. Not because the entire discussion was unfair, it wasn't. In fact, there were moments of insight, important moments. Catherine Mayers spoke about misogyny. She spoke about women being deliberately pitted against one another. She spoke about organized disinformation, also about media incentives. She even used a phrase that may be one of the most important phrases in the entire conversation: the economy of hate. And yet, having identified almost every component of the machine, when the conversation arrived at Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, the machine somehow, poof, disappeared. Suddenly, we were left examining the woman, her personality, her Americanness, her California warmth, her Hollywood background, her emails. Whether she adapted quickly enough, whether she understood the institution, whether staff found her difficult, I, I found myself asking, wait a minute, just wait a minute here. Where did the institution go? Where did the press go? Where did the briefings go? Where did the chronology go? Where did the other half of this story go? Because you cannot spend 30 minutes examining how women are manufactured into opposing characters by institutions, newspapers, and social media, and then discuss Meghan as though her reputation simply appeared naturally. That is the contradiction I want to examine today. And this matters because ITV itself described this episode as asking what really happened before Harry and Meghan left the royal family. Whether Meghan was bullied or the bully, and whether the media treated Meghan and Catherine differently. So, if we are going to ask what really happened, then surely you have to tell the whole story. And before I go any further, I want to make something clear. I usually enjoy talking royals, right? Most of the times I find them very, very fair. That is precisely why this episode was so disappointing to me. Criticism does not require contempt. Sometimes you challenge journalism because you believe journalism can do better. And I certainly believe this conversation could have gone, or they could have done much, much better. So, welcome. This is Majesty Sussex Report, and I'm Antonio. Thank you for spending some of your valuable time here with us. Here is the intro. Don't go anywhere. So, what you're going to see next and hear next is the audio of the intro that the show used and the still images of what they used. They did use a few videos, but I can't show the videos. So I took a still shot of the video. And this is what I want you to pay attention to. I want you to pay attention to the verbiage, the words that are used. I want you to pay attention to the images that are used. So is the image of the person, is it a close-up or from a distance? I want you to pay attention as to the features on the face of the person. Does the person look happy? Are they smiling? I would like you to pay attention to where do they place the person, in what environment. Is it an image that is shown with the person at home? Are they in an office? Are they on a street? So pay attention to those elements. And I ask you to do that because I want you to realize that at every moment you are being marketed to, right? There's marketing involved, there's propaganda involved, there is a message involved in the images that are used, how they're used, where they place the person. So you may think, it's just an intro, but it's not just an intro. It is setting the framework, all right? So here we go.
What really happened before Megxit? People go, I don't actually care about the royals, and then they'll go, but that Meghan.
She was an independent, working, very successful woman in her own right that then had to fit into this system, and not just fit in, but fit in within a position.
And was she a bully, or was she bullied?
I had heard about the bullying long before the story broke.
They said, just you watch. Meghan and Kate will be pitted against each other publicly.
And why is Kate such an enigma?
Kate is this extraordinary player of the long game, which is the thing that works within the royal system.
Did Kate want to be famous? Would Kate have been famous in any other circumstance? That probably wasn't where she wanted to be.
There is an extraordinary moment early in the program. The panel discusses why Harry and Meghan provoked such extreme reactions. And Catherine Mayers essentially says they are polarizing partly because we live in a culture that has put enormous effort into making them polarizing. She talks about mainstream media, new media, organized disinformation, women being pitted against each other. That is in the program. Stop there, because that is enormous. If you accept that proposition, then the next journalistic question must be, well, who constructed the polarization? How, when, with which stories, through which institutions, and who benefited? Instead, only minutes later, the conversation reaches Meghan's early days in the royal family. They remember the wedding, they remember the optimism, they remember the Grenfell Community Kitchen, they remember Meghan standing up without notes and speaking brilliantly. And then comes this extraordinary question. They essentially asked, when did everything change? The panel remembers things going from positive to negative very quickly, but says it is difficult to identify the moment. And sitting there watching it, I thought, how can we not know? I mean, really, because there is a chronology to all of this. And it starts earlier than some people seem to remember. Go back to November 2016. Meghan had not married Prince Harry. There was no royal household Meghan. There were no palace staff bullying allegations. There was no Oprah Winfrey interview. There was no Netflix documentary. There was no Spare. And yet, Prince Harry's communication office took the extraordinary step to publicly condemning what Meghan was already experiencing. This statement referred to harassment, racial undertones in published commentary, and sexism and racism directed towards her. That was November 8th, 2016. Think about that date, 2016. So when we ask, when did it turn? Perhaps the answer is that elements of it were poisoned almost from the beginning. The hostility did not suddenly materialize because Meghan sent an email too early in the morning. It did not begin with Oprah. It did not begin with what they call Megxit. Harry was publicly warning about the treatment of this woman before she had even entered the royal family. That context matters. And here is where chronology becomes essential to journalism. Because without chronology, cause and effect can quietly change places. The audience can begin believing Meghan behaved badly, therefore, terrible coverage followed. But what happens when terrible coverage was already happening? What happens when that pressure preceded many of the events later used to explain it? That does not automatically establish Meghan's innocence regarding every workplace disagreement, probably. Of course, it doesn't. But it changes the investigation, it changes the question.
And one of the things that I say in the book, I talk about the ways in which I had heard about the bullying long before the story broke. So there was a very, the allegations of bullying.
Particularly this is Meghan bullying, isn't it? Not Meghan being bullied.
No, about her bullying. I began to hear that, and it was interesting that I was hearing it because I wasn't at that stage intending ever to write or do anything again about the royals. So people weren't telling me that because they wanted it to get out. Right. They were telling me that because they thought it wouldn't get out. And they were friendly and they wanted to vent. But so it's not that there were not tensions. There absolutely were. But my question is, how did the institution let this go on so long without taking appropriate action, whatever that action might be, whatever was really going on? And also then the decision for them to let that become public right at the same time as the Meghan and Harry sit down with Oprah Winfrey. Absolutely. What I would say is, I think that there were a whole set of kind of cultural rifts and clashes. And, there was, we all know that the palace is entirely capable institutionally of being dusty and having racism in its corners and being this Planet Windsor place that I talk about where the rules are just different. It's a lot to ask somebody to come in there
and to immediately adapt to.
And I mean,
I was just going to ask you, do you think, because you mentioned the cultural differences, do you think what perhaps some in the palace saw as bullying was just Meghan being American, being a bit more upfront, being a bit more out there? Or do you think there was actually a culture of bullying of staff? Because the two can be misinterpreted, can't they?
I definitely think that there is a clash, and just saying that she's American doesn't really explain it, because with Meghan you have two aspects of her sort of behaviour and cultural outlook, which I think British people typically misunderstand and which would have been at odds with palace culture. One is being Californian, which gives her all of the kind of touchy-feely language that people mock here or react against, whereas it's perfectly normal in California. And the other is the Hollywood system. And the Hollywood system, of course, is one where stars are in control. And if you've, as I suspect all of you had, done interviews with people who work in Hollywood, you have PR people hanging around telling you what questions you can't ask, and you have people expecting to be able to kind of snap their fingers and get things done. And some of the stuff that she was accused of, like the emails at all times of day and night. I mean,
There is another question I wish the program had spent more time asking. Who was Meghan professionally before Kensington Palace? Because Meghan did not arrive at the palace at 20 years old, with no employment history, no money to her name. She had spent years working professionally. She had worked on television. She had undertaken charitable and advocacy work. She had maintained her own lifestyle platform. She had been employed on Suits for years. So if we are assessing someone's workplace character, shouldn't their previous workplace history at least enter the discussion? Not as proof, context. There is an important distinction. A person can behave differently in different environments. People can have good experiences with one colleague and bad experiences with another. But if you are constructing a profile of someone of their professional conduct, you examine the record before, during, and after the dispute period. When the palace allegations became public in 2021, several people who had worked with Meghan before royal life publicly defended her. Patrick J. Adams, who worked alongside her on Suits for years, described the colleague he experienced as supportive, cooperative, and kind. Other former colleagues also defended her. Does that prove no palace employee ever felt mistreated? No, it doesn't. And we should be intelligently disciplined enough to say no. But shouldn't it be part of the evidence? It should. Of course it should. Because journalism is not simply the collection of accusations. Journalism examines competing evidence. Really. This is where I think Talking Royals needed much greater precision. Catherine Mayers says she had heard allegations about Meghan bullying staff before the story became public. Okay. I mean, that is relevant. I'm not dismissing it by any means. Indeed, Mayers makes one of the fairest points in the entire program. She says there clearly were tensions, and then she asked an excellent question. What did the institution do about them? Right? So if there are these tensions and allegations, the institution, the firm, what did you do? Why wasn't it properly resolved internally? And why did the allegations become public when they did? Those are legitimate questions because the complaint attributed to Jason Knauf dated to October 2018. The public did not learn about it in October 2018. The Times published the allegations in March 2021, days before Harry and Meghan's interview with Oprah Winfrey was broadcast. Meghan denied bullying the staff. Buckingham Palace then announced an investigation. And and here is something incredibly important. The palace review was completed, but Buckingham Palace did not, let me repeat, did not publish its conclusions. In June 2022, the palace said that lessons had been learned and HR procedures had been reviewed while declining to disclose what the investigation had actually concluded about the allegations. So, where does that leave us? Not with Meghan was proven to be a bully. It doesn't, because she wasn't. But also not with we know absolutely nothing happened. We don't know that either. We are left with unresolved allegations. And that distinction matters. Look, I'm trying to be absolutely fair here, right? Because allegations should not quietly harden into biography merely through repetition. So they keep repeating this narrative. She's a bully, she's a bully, she's a bully. Where is the proof? These anonymous sources, these former employees that don't put their names to their allegations or accusations, no, no, that is not credible. And this brings me to perhaps the strongest omission, Jason Knauf. How do you have an extended discussion about the Meghan bullying controversy without seriously examining Jason Knauf? I don't know how you do. He is not some irrelevant character standing at the edge of the story. He was the communications secretary working across the royal household. He authored the 2018 complaint expressing concern about Meghan's treatment of staff. Later, during Meghan's legal battle against Associated Newspapers over publication of her over the publication of her private letter to her father, Jason Knauf provided evidence used by the newspapers during its appeal. Right? That evidence was consequential. Really, it was. I mean, despite Knauf's evidence, Associated Newspapers lost the appeal. The Court of Appeal upheld Meghan's victory over, over the publication of the private letter. Both things are true. That is what balanced analysis would look like. But they didn't even touch him. They didn't say anything at all about him. The other thing too is that Jason Knauf subsequently worked closely with William and Catherine. He became chief executive of their royal foundation. He remained involved with Prince William's Earthshot Prize. And in 2025, Earthshot announced that Jason Knauf had been appointed its CEO. And to this date, he remains as its CEO today. I mean, he's the one who goes on the trips with William. Catherine is not, well, not invited. Now, I am not telling you that this proves some great conspiracy. I'm leaving that up to you to come to your own conclusions. Because what I'm saying to you, it isn't a conspiracy. I am asking something much simpler. How is that relationship not relevant if you're going to talk about Meghan being accused of bullying? Because if we are discussing the origins, where that story started and came from, handling and later public life of the bullying allegations, surely the institutional position of the man who raised it deserves examination. And that is what journalism should be doing. And they didn't. There was another person strangely absent from much of this conversation or the reconstruction, and that's Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex. Imagine trying to reconstruct why Richard Nixon resigned without examining Watergate testimony. Again, imagine discussing a company's collapse, but deciding not to read the account of one of the executives who was actually inside the room. You may disagree with the witness, you may challenge the witness, you may believe the witness is biased, but surely you examine the testimony. I mean, Prince Harry wrote an entire memoir describing his experience inside this institution. Yet, when the program asked what happened between Meghan, William, Catherine, the staff, and the competing households, how can spare barely enter the analysis? Harry alleges that the relationship between the households deteriorated significantly. He writes about staff divisions. He recounts arguments involving Meghan and Catherine, and he describes one confrontation in which William allegedly pointed his finger at Meghan and called her rude, after which Meghan told him to remove his finger from her face. Thank you very much. That is Harry's account. It is an allegation contained in his memoir, not an independently established fact, but it's there. It's relevant as testimony. Contemporary reporting on Spare documented that account. So why not discuss it? Why not discuss the things that are in Spare if you're going to go on that path? I mean, so then why discuss cultural tensions without discussing the testimony describing those tensions? Why discuss Meghan's allegedly bruising people without examining her husband's account of how Meghan herself was being treated? That imbalance matters. It really does. Because if we only describe one direction of the conflict, the audience will naturally conclude that conflict traveled in only one direction, right? They'll point the finger. And now we arrive at something even more difficult. Meghan told Oprah Winfrey that while pregnant, she reached a point where she did not want to be alive any longer. She described having unaliving thoughts and said she sought out help. And just think about this. A pregnant woman says that while living inside this institution, she reached that level of despair. So if your program is asking, what really happened before Harry and Meghan left? How can that not be central to the discussion? This is not a minor detail, right? But it tells us something profoundly about the psychological environment in which all these events were occurring. And this is one of the dangers of telling stories backwards. If you begin with, oh, well, she was difficult, she has bullying allegations, then every subsequent fact can be interpreted as evidence of her difficulty or of her bullying. Any look that she gives, any kind of like facial movement that she does, then it becomes the emails becomes proof. The staff turnover, well, that becomes proof too. Her frustration becomes proof. Her defensiveness becomes proof. Her decision to leave becomes proof. But what happens, all right, if you begin somewhere else? What if you begin with a woman under extraordinary media scrutiny inside an unfamiliar institution and pregnant, saying she was struggling to survive emotionally, while stories based on unnamed palace sources appeared relentlessly outside every single day? Does the same behavior suddenly look different? Maybe. This is why context matters. It matters because it depends on how and where you start. If you start out with she was having issues and how the institution handled those issues, then there's a different conversation than, oh, well, there was allegations of her bullying people. Now, this part of the conversation where the author of the book kept the guest panelists, she used the phrase, well, she's Californian, right? It just didn't sit with me well. It just gave me a weird feeling, right? Almost problematic. And it really kind of troubled me. It's because the panel tries to explain some of the cultural friction around Megan by talking about her being from California. Well, she's more expressive, more touchy feely. They also discuss the Hollywood workplace culture she came from. Could cultural differences have contributed to misunderstandings? Certainly. That is reasonable. But notice how easily explanation slips into characterization. Oh, well, she hugs people. We're not like that. She's Californian. Oh, well, she's American. Oh, well, she's from Hollywood. They think they're all that. She's very direct and kind of rude. She's very expressive. Now ask yourself, at what point does cultural difference become evidence of misconduct? Because those, those are two very different things. One of the allegations repeatedly attached to Meghan over the years concerns early morning emails. Even the panel itself notes the obvious problem with the argument. An email can arrive outside normal working hours without requiring an immediate response. More recently, current and former Sussex staff have said Meghan explicitly tells employees they are not obliged to reply outside of their working hours. That does not tell us exactly what happened inside Kensington Palace in 2018, but it illustrates why an email timestamp cannot by itself establish bullying. The question is not when was the email sent? The question is, what did it say? What was expected? What happened if the employee did not respond? Was there intimidation, humiliation, threats, retaliation? Those are workplace questions. An American sent an email at 5 o'clock in the morning is not an HR investigation. It isn't.
One of the primary reasons, not the only reason, but one of the primary reasons that the British tabloid press and the so-called British monarchy have worked so hard over the years to discredit and malign Harry and Meghan in every way that they can is because they need and want Harry and Meghan to fail. The monarchy as an institution is supposed to represent tradition, culture, and a very specific set of values for a very specific set of people that have worked very hard to build the world in a very specific image. Those traditions, values, and images don't necessarily have to be true. They just have to be projected to be true. We just need to believe and want to believe that the British monarchy is the very epitome of humanity. Also because they represent, the color of my shirt, like that supremacy. They represent that, right? So when Harry and Meghan broke away from that institution, from that family, they were supposed to fail, not just for the sake of failing, but also because they were supposed to represent the idea that if you break away from this beautiful, pure thing that is supposed to represent what is good and pure about the world and about culture and about society, like if you break away from that, you are supposed to be punished. You are supposed to have your comeuppance. And so in 2020, when Harry and Meghan decided against the advice of the institution to leave the institution, it was expected by the media, by society, by everybody that the world was going to shun Harry and Meghan. Celebrities were going to shun them. Everybody who's anybody was going to shun them, and they were going to fail. And not only that, Harry was supposed to see in time and with time that Meghan was really the wrong choice for him. He never should have married her. He never should have had children with her. He never should have left the United Kingdom with her. And he should have by now grown tired of her, such that he realizes that all she ever wanted from him was fame and money, even though Meghan was already famous and had her own money when she married into this family. In fact, she is the only member of this family who made her own money. She is the only self-made money person in this entire family. But I digress. In summary, in short, Harry is supposed to have realized by now that he should have just married an English rose like everybody wanted him to in the very beginning. And that is why one of the key criticisms you will hear against Meghan is that, well, she took Harry away from his family and now she isolated him and that she made him miserable. Like, that is a key criticism against this woman, is that Harry used to be fun. He used to look happy. He used to be joyful, and he used to just be this unicorn and rainbow and sunshine person. And now he's absolutely miserable. Like, he has fallen off ever since he left the United Kingdom. He is the most miserable man you have ever seen in your life. And I understand that we don't really know what's going on in people's homes, right? But every time these people pathologize Harry as being regretful, remorseful, and just miserable and wanting to go back home, because that's the other thing. All of this isn't happening in a vacuum. It's happening in the context of people genuinely wanting Harry to take the children away from Meghan and abandon her and run all the way back to the United Kingdom with his tail between his legs, to be begging his brother and his father to let him back in. Which is why there's a new article every single week from a new tabloid that is telling us that Harry and Meghan are actually getting a divorce because he's so tired of her. Like, she is so fame hungry. She's so money hungry. Like, she's the worst. And he's tired of her. And he's taking the kids and he's leaving. Like, there's literally a new article every week, right? But again, I digress. Because every single time that these people talk about Harry being miserable, it's usually from like a video like this one, like the one I am currently showing you right now, right? And again, we don't know what's going on in people's homes, but I want you to keep in mind that all of these people that call Harry miserable are also deducing this misery from this video, like from this kind of footage that you and I get. This is the only time we ever get into Harry and Meghan's lives, is when they share these little moments with us. It's kind of like how we all look at the stars and see such different things. Like the Greeks looked at a great big square in the sky and saw a freaking horse, a winged horse at that. So it's kind of like that, where you and I and everybody else, we are watching this video right now. I'm not trying to influence you. I'm not trying to propagandize you, but personally, I'm looking at this video and seeing a happy man. But here's the thing. Somebody else at the exact same time is looking at the very same video and seeing a miserable man who just wants a divorce and just wants to be let back into his toxic, enmeshed family. Like, I need you to understand just how strong the propaganda is when it comes to this couple. And this is the other thing, right? Like, these people aren't just calling him miserable. Like, I need you to understand that part. They have body language experts. They have a lady who listens to frogs or listens to celery or something of that nonsense kind, right? She listens to these talking vegetables and animals, and they tell her that Harry is miserable. And pundits on television, on British national television, will get on air and platform such a woman as being like an expert on Harry and Meghan's marriage. All of which is to say that within the next few days, next few weeks, and next few months, to counteract all of this hairy content on Meghan's Instagram page, that's where I got the video, to counteract all of this, we are going to be getting renewed divorce rumors. We are going to get renewed Meghan is terrible news headlines. We are going to get renewed panels just dedicated to what Meghan is doing wrong, what Harry could advise Meghan to do correctly, how Meghan could ingratiate herself, if at all possible, because that's the thing they're going to remind you about, is that Meghan can try all she wants, but no one wants her back, and nobody is ready to accept her apology if and when it does eventually come. But in the meantime, here are the several ways in which she could grovel. I also want you to pay attention to how they're going to write about Harry as somebody who doesn't necessarily have any agency whatsoever. Like, he's going to be this poor little boy who doesn't really understand how the world works, doesn't really understand seduction and manipulation, which is how Meghan is keeping him blind and all of that. Like, they are going to feel so bad for this man, and at the same time be like, hey Harry, if you want to come back without her, we're okay with you, we love you, it's her we don't like, it's the kids we really hate, abandon them and come back and marry an English rose. So yeah, if you see these kinds of articles in the next coming weeks, in the next coming days, do not be alarmed. It's just regular programming. It's just regular program. Like, every time Meghan posts something on her Instagram, expect the worst to follow. But what do I know? I'm just an uppity African with a Wi-Fi connection and a smartphone. I hope you have a lovely Sunday. Ciao for now.
Let me just say that I agree with absolutely everything she just said, 100%. Now, the program, Talking Royals, at this point, it introduces another contrast. Catherine is described as someone exceptionally suited to playing the royal long game. Camilla is described as perhaps the ultimate practitioner of it. Do not respond. Keep your head down. Do the work. Build the image slowly. Allow the time to rehabilitate the reputation. So the panel discusses this directly, and there is something worth examining here, because perhaps that really is how one survives inside the House of Windsor. But should we confuse survival strategy with moral virtue? Those are not the same things. Catherine had years to understand William's world before marriage. The program itself acknowledges this. She grew up in Britain. She met William at university. She had a long period in which to observe royal life before becoming a senior working royal, quote unquote. Meghan entered under entirely different conditions. She was older. She had already developed a public voice. She had already built a career. She had already spoken publicly about issues she cared about. Then she entered an institution in which, as the panel itself explained, royal women largely surrendered the freedom to speak for themselves. That difference fascinates me because perhaps Meghan's great institutional problem was not simply that she failed to understand the rules, as they like to say. Perhaps she understood them well and eventually concluded she could not live by them because also they kept changing for her. When absence becomes virtue, because there is another part of this conversation that I think deserves much closer examination. Because something quite remarkable happens when the panel begins discussing Catherine. Listen carefully to the language that they use. Catherine is an enigma. She plays the long game. Perhaps she never wanted fame. She is cautious, measured, guarded. She and William may be following the example of the late Queen. They supposedly do not need to announce what they believe in. They simply get on with the job, quietly, gradually, dutifully. And if you listen to all of that together, something begins to happen. You are no longer simply describing Catherine, you are constructing a character, and it is an extraordinarily flattering one. So here's my question. If Catherine is truly such an enigma, how does the panel know all of these things about her? Think about it. They tell us we don't really know Catherine. And then almost immediately, they tell us what motivates her. She probably never wanted to be famous. She understands the long game. She has deliberately drawn a line between public and private. She quietly believes in causes without needing to tell all of us or to shout it out loud. She has adopted the late Queen's philosophy. But those are not facts. Those are interpretations of of the absence of facts. And almost every interpretation travels in the same direction towards virtue. Silence becomes dignity, limited access becomes mystery, caution becomes wisdom. Not speaking becomes discipline, longevity, strategy. And it certainly creates this sort of fascinating persona. Because when the media encounters an empty space around Catherine, it frequently fills that space with something complementary. When it encounters an empty space around Meghan, how often has the same space been filled with suspicion? What is she hiding? What is she planning? Who is advising her? Why hasn't she said anything for a month? Why has she said too much? That is not pitting the women against each other. That is examining how narratives work. And listen to something else the panel says. They describe Catherine as this extraordinary practitioner of the royal long game. And guess who else? Camilla, right? So according to the panel, they don't react, don't answer um, every criticism, don't try to control the agenda. Keep working. Allow the years to shape your public opinion, to shape the public opinion. But even within their own discussion, there is a contradiction. The panel acknowledges that William and Catherine do have people who brief the press on their behalf. Their point is that those briefings are controlled and apparently authorized. Well, that matters, because that is not the absence of media strategy. That is media strategy. And there is nothing inherently wrong with having media strategy. Every major public institution has one. The Prince and Princess of Wales have their own Kensington Palace communication team. That is not speculation. The royal family owns its own media center, and so on. Right? We have the Royal Rota. Reporting during the Kensington Palace communication crisis in 2024 described a substantial operation surrounding William and Catherine, including a dedicated communication and social media apparatus helping craft their public message. So perhaps we should retire the fairy tale that this image simply floated into existence, right? Because Catherine quietly kept her head down, or oh, this quietly happened, or no, it's a machine. There is an institution, there is a communication operation, there are photographs, there are press releases, there are briefings, there are controlled access, there are carefully selected appearances, there is social media, right? And they are incentives that are constructed around particular areas of work. That is image management. Again, there is nothing scandalous about it. Not too long ago, Rebecca English was just said on her show, and she was all about, well, I was with the king and the queen, and we were in South Africa and Nairobi, and then we went to the further part of the island, and then we went to there and there and there, right? That access that they get, and then to come back and report on it and be all pompous about it. Well, I was in the garden, and I saw the king as he was talking to a little bird, you see, and as I just sort of floated next to him, he looked at me, and he gently, just absolutely gently, his lips just moved in such a way. I'm telling you, he's so gracious, isn't he? So he's just magnificent. He's just, I mean, if this wasn't something, if there was a word really that existed that I can utilize to describe, I mean, come on. So let me return to the original question. Was Meghan bullied, or was Meghan the bully? Perhaps that is the wrong question, right? Perhaps journalism should be asking what happened inside that institution. What were the complaints? What evidence support them? What evidence contradict them? How did management respond? Why did the complaint remain internal for years? Why did it become public immediately before one of the most consequential interviews Harry and Meghan had ever given? Right? This is important. Why were the results of the investigation never published? What role did the competing royal households play? And what was happening to Meghan psychologically? What was happening in the press simultaneously? Those are valid questions in order to figure out whether this is over here or it's over there. What do the accounts of Harry, Meghan, staff members, Jason Knauf, and others witnesses say? Right? I mean, the it wasn't completely, I would say, a fail, but these are important questions to ask. Because if your title was Meghan bullied, or was she the bully, and you spend half of the time just attacking, whether positive or negative, her personality. You see what I mean? You start with the institution, you start with all these institutional things, these external factors, but then instead of going deep on that, they decided, nah, let's just talk about Meghan's personality and her character. So what bothered me about this episode of Talking Royals? Not that the panel hated Meghan. They clearly didn't. In fact, that is what makes this conversation so revealing. They recognized the misogyny. They recognized the disinformation. They recognized women being pitted against one another. They even recognized what Catherine Mayer so aptly called the economy of hate. And yet, when the conversation arrived at Meghan, so much of that machinery mysteriously disappeared. Suddenly, we were back to Meghan's personality. California, Hollywood, emails, whether she adapted, whether she was difficult. And I kept thinking, you have just described the factory. Why are you now blaming the product for coming off the assembly line? They ask when everything turned. But Harry was publicly condemning racial and sexist abuse directed at Meghan back in 2016, before the wedding, before palace staff disputes, before Oprah, before Spare. So perhaps the hostility did not simply arrive because Meghan behaved badly. Perhaps some of it was there waiting for her, and that changes the story. Then there are the bullying allegations. Serious allegations deserve serious examination, but the palace conducted a review and never published its findings. So we are left in the peculiar position where the accusation may be repeated indefinitely. But the conclusion remains private. The allegation is public. The finding is confidential. Convenient, isn't it? And that is the larger problem with this program. Bias does not always require a lie. Sometimes bias is simply deciding which facts deserve oxygen and which ones can quietly suffocate off camera. It is who receives context and who receives suspicion, whose silence becomes dignity and whose silence becomes calculation, whose ambition becomes service and whose ambition becomes arrogance. One woman becomes an enigma, the other becomes a problem to be explained. I don't need Talking Royals to defend Meghan. I need them to do something much more basic. Be equally curious. If Meghan is accused, investigate. If Meghan makes an accusation, investigate that too. If the palace says it investigated, ask what it found. If Harry gives his account in Spare, don't reconstruct the collapse of his family while pretending the book is sitting on another planet. And if a woman says life inside that institution brought her to one of the darkest moments imaginable, do not reduce the story to whether she sent emails too early in the morning. Perhaps Meghan made mistakes. Of course she did. She is a person, not a porcelain figurine. But tell the whole story, because once you remove the press, remove the palace, remove the briefings, remove the racial dimension, remove Harry's testimony, and remove what Meghan says was happening to her, you haven't necessarily told a lie. You've done something rather more sophisticated. You've left enough truth out that the remaining truth tells a different story. And perhaps that is the most effective form of propaganda of all. You don't have to invent anything. You simply decide what the audience never gets to hear. And then the silence does the work for you. All right. So here we are. Estamos aquí en la conclusión. El final. That's it. It's the final. It's the closure of today's episode, today's podcast. First and foremost, I hope you were able to take away something from it. And if you lasted this long, thank you. Merci, gracias for hanging in there. And I hope it was entertaining a little bit too, right? Oh boy, I tell you, I don't know if the word is surprise, that I'm always surprised that the British media, the British press, seem to have amnesia as to what causation the things that they do have and had. They will discuss and analyze everything around it, but never take responsibility for what they have done and what they continue to do. I mean, Talking Royals, I watch ever so often, and I watch it because their commentary most of the time is pretty fair, right? They're not these, at least the shows that I've watched, not these obsessive bashing people of the Sussexes. But this particular episode that they did, it was so evident to me that they were reinforcing, whether it's in a light way, the narrative, right? Meghan is still discussed a certain way, and Catherine is discussed another. And the words that they use and the sort of very long runway that they give to Catherine, it's just quite amazing. And the author, actually, you know what? I'm not going to talk about that. I think I said enough. Well, as I said, that's it. I hope you enjoyed it. For all of you who are new around here, thank you for joining. I really appreciate it. We really appreciate it. So our little channel could get noticed a little bit more, and we can find more like-minded people. And thank you for commenting. Thank you for the thumbs up. Thank you for what's the word again? Passing it along. No, it's not passing it along. It's not forwarding. Whatever the other things are that YouTube wants us to do in order for the algorithm to be activated. And I say am a lot. This, that, a this, a that. I need to stop. Well, thank you once again. And if this is the first time you're discovering us, I hope you're entertained. I hope you subscribe. Please do subscribe. And as I said, do all the things that the algorithm would like us to do, including the samba, the lamba, the lambada, the cha-cha-cha, the merengue, and the waltz, and the beehive, and I don't know. I don't even know what I'm saying anymore. So be kind to yourselves, please. Be kind to yourself, be kind to your loved ones, and to that stranger crossing your path. Be kind to them too. You never know. You just never know. So thank you. God bless. Oh, one other thing. No, maybe tomorrow. Okay, all right. That's it. God bless. Take care. Ciao, ciao. Mwah.
For your palace, work I loved and name my own. Crossed an ocean for a promise, tried to make your world my home. I learned the rules, I bowed, I smiled, till breathing there felt wrong. Then you said I didn't belong there, so we chose love and moved on. You called my leaving confirmation of every lie you made of me, but you cannot push me from the room, then rage because I'm free.